Alright guys, I have been putting off making this video for quite some time now. I am going to be talking about the three worst moments of my life, the most irresponsible moments that were dangerous to me, and more importantly to other people. They could have resulted in me losing my life or other people losing their lives. They are completely unfunny moments that run so counter to my character that if you told anyone who knows me, even the people who knew that I was having a problem with substance abuse, if you told them that I did these things, they probably wouldn't believe you. So these are not like the cute war stories. These are not the stories of adventure that sometimes happen, especially early on in addiction. If you know anything about my channel, you know that I very rarely share war stories of any type because I simply do not want to run the risk of glorifying addiction, and I don't ever want to be that voice that tempts a young person to experiment with addictive mind-altering drugs. So I'm talking about these experiences today. Again, the three lowest moments of my life. I'm talking about them with a really specific goal, and that is to highlight how dangerous benzodiazepines, so those sleep and anti-anxiety drugs like Xanax and Valium and Ativan, their chemical names tend to end with Pam, so you've got, in those cases, you've got alprazolam, diazepam, lorazepam. You've also got a very similar class of chemicals that act at the same receptor called Z drugs, so those are Ambien, Lunesta, Sonata, and those start with, called Z drugs because they start with Z's, their chemical names. So we're talking about all of those substances, and they are sometimes called alcohol in pill form. Now, that is not true biochemically speaking, but it is close enough that gives you a rough idea of the effects. Again, they're anti-anxiety drugs, they're sleep drugs, but they are a hell of a lot more dangerous than alcohol. And there are a couple reasons for that. One of the main reasons is that they are smoother. So you can take these drugs at well over the therapeutic doses. And I sometimes took an entire month's prescription, so 30 to 60 milligrams of Xanax within 24 hours. And if you had just gotten a snapshot of me for 30 seconds or a minute, you probably would have known that something was off about me. You might have just thought, though, that I was really tired or something else was going on, that I was distracted. So what I'm getting at is you're not as evidently impaired as you are with alcohol. You don't get the gross motor discoordination that happens with alcohol. You don't reek of it, and so you can function at an apparently much higher level while you are drastically disinhibited. You're doing things that you would never in a million years do, except for the influence of these substances. And so these are incredibly dangerous. Benzos lead to so much damage in every areas of people's lives, even if you're taking them at therapeutic dosages, sometimes even if you're doing that on a PRN, an as-needed basis. As I've said before, I have a profound opioid addiction that has dictated the whole trajectory of my life for almost 20 years now. It has been hell on earth. And if you gave me the choice to either not have been addicted to benzos or to not have been addicted to opioids, I would, without question, accept the opioid addiction and give up the benzo addiction every single time. 99.99% of the most humiliating, harmful to others, just out of character, awful stuff that I've done during addiction was down to benzos, not to opioids. Again, incredibly dangerous class of chemicals, and we have been lied to about these chemicals because Big Pharma have promoted their use as lifestyle drugs, as mother's little helper, as a way to take the sort of edge off the American dream. I made another video about the biochemical trap that these drugs cause if you take them at therapeutic doses on a non-PRN basis. So in other words, if you're taking them on a daily or bi-daily basis, they get you into this situation because of what happens to your GABA A receptors over time, and then what happens to your excitatory neurotransmitters like glutamate. where you get long-term dysregulation of your nervous system. So they actually create more anxiety, they create sleeplessness, they create panic attacks. And the dependence that I'm talking about is so severe and so physiologic that benzos can kill you in withdrawal. I have had at least half a dozen grand mal, so major seizures from benzo withdrawal, and those have damaged me intrinsically. They've damaged me because I had one while I was upright talking on the phone, and I fell from, my 6 feet height, down and smashed my head on a wooden surface. So that caused a concussion and possible subdural hemorrhage that had profound effects for the whole year following. Benzo withdrawal can kill you. It causes seizures that can affect you in the long term. And I beg of you, if you're considering taking these drugs, the truth about them has really been disguised by big pharma. So please go to Benzo Buddies. Please go to, there's a great YouTuber who's a former FDA medical advisor whose YouTube account name is Taper Clinic. His name is Dr. Joseph, and he does a phenomenal job talking about how dangerous benzos are and how some of the damage that they cause, again, that long-term upregulation of excitatory neurotransmitters like glutamate, that can last forever. So I made a short video about that called the Xanny Trap, and if you're interested in why these substances do the things that they do and how someone like me could end up in the situations that I'm about to talk about under their influence, please consider checking those resources out. So that's a little bit of a preamble, and I know it was all over the place, but I'm just trying to give a little bit of context because it's not just me who has had the worst moments of his life caused by these substances, and on that subject, I just have one more thing I would like to say as a sort of introductory statement to go along with this profoundly cautionary tale, and that is that, while this was happening, I was in my early to mid-20s when my benzo addiction was at its severest. I have been on methadone maintenance and off of benzos completely. I haven't had a drink or a benzo in over 18 months now. But during my early to mid-20s, I was so severely addicted to these substances. Again, I was taking entire scripts within 24 to 36 hours. And because of that, I have huge chunks of memory that are missing. I have times when my mom filmed me once to try to show me how bad I was on these substances, and I came home, I was acting fairly normal. Again, I'm not falling all over or anything like that. I can talk without my voice being super slurred, but I decide that I want some Diet Coke, and I open a Diet Coke and I drink from it. I put it down. Then like a zombie, the thought occurs to me, I want a sip of Diet Coke. So I go to the fridge, I get a Diet Coke, I open it, I take a sip, hold it for a minute, take another sip, put it down right next to the first one, probably 2 or 3 feet away on the counter. About 30 seconds later, I have the thought, boy, I'm starting to feel tired, right? But those benzos, that entire script that I took is starting to kick in and do its job. So I need some caffeine. Go to the refrigerator again and repeat. I am processing this thought that I want caffeine, I want Diet Coke, and I am opening the cans with no problem at all. But these drugs are so profoundly amnesic that I'm not encoding the memory. My brain literally doesn't remember what I did 30 or 45 seconds ago. It's not put in short-term memory, and of course, it's not put from there into long-term memory. So I did that 7 or 8 times in the space of 10 minutes that my mom filmed me, and she wasn't trying to humiliate me. She was trying to show me exactly how bad this was. So scary stuff, and I have whole chunks of my life missing because of these substances. So some of the worst moments of my life, I don't even know what happened during them. And if that doesn't terrify you, it really should, because even at therapeutic dosages, people get pulled over and they have no idea what they're doing driving under the influence of Ambien. There's an Ambien defense that's been used for crimes all the way up to murder about doing things that were due to these drugs that you would never do otherwise, and that crucially you don't remember. There are people, again, at therapeutic dosages. Maybe they have a glass of wine with their nightly Xanax. And when that happens, they 2 days later get a huge delivery of an Amazon haul of things that they wanted in that moment that they don't remember ordering. And now they've got $200 on their credit card that they would have never ordered under other circumstances. So again, the very worst moments, some of them I likely don't remember. And if you really consider what that means, terrifying stuff, But So on top of that, I just want to stress in my early to mid-20s, I didn't know it yet, but I was at my current height, so 6 feet tall. I weighed 40 pounds less than I weigh now. I think I weighed 138 or 140 pounds. I was eating 3,000, 4,000 calories a day. I was eating like an Olympic athlete, and I could not put weight on. And everybody knew I was sick. People were scared for me. My heart was beating fast all the time. I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder. I knew something deeper was wrong, but I thought it was down to my addiction. Eventually, TLDR, I would learn that I have an autoimmune disease called Graves' disease. It's a disease where your body makes basically antibodies that stimulate your thyroid gland, which controls your metabolism. It controls the activity of almost every organ system in your body, including your mind. So I basically walked around for years before my Graves was diagnosed. I had a radioablation treatment using radioactive iodine to destroy my thyroid gland, and I got on replacement levothyroxine, replacement thyroid hormone. Before that all was diagnosed and I was treated, I walked around in a manic state where my mind was going a billion miles a minute. The anxiety was unbearable. I felt like I was being tortured by my own body, and I could not sleep, even under the influence of massive benzos and even sometimes butalbital and phenobarbital. I got in to barbiturates, the ones that were still around clinically, those drugs like Seconal and Tuinal that were profoundly addictive and profoundly dangerous in overdose. Now, those drugs act almost exactly like benzos. They act at the same receptor in a slightly different mechanism, and because of that, they are, again, much more deadly in overdose. They cause more profound muscle relaxation, but benzos and barbiturates are like not even cousins. They're maybe fraternal twins or something like that. So even those drugs wouldn't calm me down enough to get more than 2 or 3 hours of sleep. So some of the behavior that I'm talking about, I'm not excusing one bit of it. I am so ashamed of these stories, but some of it was influenced by the physical disease, this Graves' disease, this autoimmune problem that I had going on, okay? The other thing that I would like to say, because it relates to my situation, but also I just think in general, this has always irritated me when people say like getting drunk or being under the influence of substances like benzos, it doesn't make you do anything that's not in you. It doesn't make you do anything that you don't really want to do. It just brings out the real you. And that is totally false. I can testify to that being false just by observed experience of what I do on these substances versus what I would ever even conceive of under other circumstances, the two being so different, I mean. But in addition to that, I will say this: a lot of character is just basically, it's inherited. Temperament, your sort of disposition, whether you're very reactive or very calm, very extroverted or very introverted, that is dictated by your genes. Again, we're talking about temperament. Personality is sort of like it grows out of temperament as you develop, and your family influences, your wider societal influences have their effect on you. Personality is not so strictly biologically dictated, but it is governed by what's in your genes that causes your temperament. So you've got all that influencing your behavior, but on top of that, you've got your inhibitions. Your inhibitions are what prevents you from doing things that it might occur to you to do, okay? And we all have antisocial fantasies. We all sometimes have fantasies of getting revenge on other people and things like that. So our inhibitions are a fundamental part of who they are, and I think they're especially important when you're evaluating someone's character. Inhibitions are especially important because, yeah, some of them are sort of socially coded into us. It's what Freud called the superego. They're internalized social or societal mores, but a lot of them, all of us pick and choose a little bit to what degree we obey all of those social or societal mores. So really, I think inhibitions are a really important part of who we are. Again, they're the things that we choose to put in ourselves, these roadblocks to stop us from doing things that we decide we don't want to do. So losing your inhibitions under the influence of profoundly disinhibiting drugs like benzos, that means that you have lost an essential component of who you are. So when people say, all those things you did under the influence, those were things you really wanted to do. I don't agree with that, but even if that were true, you're missing a key component in your analysis. And again, that key component is, all these things that you chose to allow to limit you because, for example, you decided you didn't want to just hurt other people, even if you could get away with it. You decide you want to act in a certain way that you consider dignified, even though there was no law preventing you from acting in what you consider an undignified manner, right? So things like being polite and following etiquette, right? So all of those are an important part of who we are. And in my opinion, it is not just your true self coming out under the influence of these substances. So this whole preamble was just a little bit longer than I intended to be, but I think it's necessary for this video. So without further ado, I'm going to get right into these 3 stories. Again, I know you're going to judge me, but please, to the extent that you can, please take those things that I mentioned under consideration in context. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to tell you about is a really bad car crash that I caused. And I want to tell you one other story that influenced how I processed what I did, because this is a terrible set of decisions that I made under the influence of huge amounts of Xanax, okay? So when I was growing up, I thought my mom had the coolest job in the world. She was a criminal defense attorney. She took on some really famous cases. So a lot of drug cases, especially of people further up the distribution ladder, but she had a case where she defended an abused housewife who was accused of poisoning her husband with antifreeze in his coffee. When he came home drunk from the bar, he was an abusive alcoholic. So that woman, my mom helped to get her off. There was another case my mom took on appeal where a guy who was a heroin addict who was well known to his local police was falsely convicted of the murder of a social worker in a small upstate New York town near Syracuse. He did many years in prison. He almost died in prison of liver failure due to hepatitis C before his liver was transplanted, and miraculously, or semi-miraculously, he made it out of the hospital and back to prison. My mom and another attorney who was working on the case, the late great Jim McGraw, they basically they appealed to the Innocence Project and asked for help getting expedited DNA testing of samples that had been found on the murdered worker and social worker and elsewhere on the scene. And Roy, this guy's name was Roy Brown, and he was released from prison again after serving years for a crime that he didn't commit. So really, I grew up so interested and fascinated by my mom's career. And one of the stories that she told me about was just of a totally ordinary woman who lived in one of the western suburbs of Syracuse, just like we did. And this woman, she had a problem with alcohol. She had been arrested for a DWI once before and had gotten away with a slap on the wrist. And so my mom had represented her, and so when this woman got in trouble the second time around, it was my mom who they called. My mom had to go to the Justice Center to meet this woman. I think this was happening, I believe, on a Friday morning. It was a Friday morning arraignment after she had been arrested late in the evening on Thursday, okay? Now, my mom showed up, and before she could kind of say anything, her client started telling her, like, look, I know I have a serious problem. Like, I know I didn't pursue the therapy that I should have as intensely as I should have after the first DWI. Like, I'm in the wrong here. I am ready to stop my life and go away to treatment, like whatever it takes. Like she said, she had seen the light. She knew how dangerous it was, and she didn't want to keep living this way. And my mom had to tell, again, this suburban housewife who'd never been in any trouble aside from this DWI, that she had crashed into another vehicle head on the night before, and that she had killed a woman and a young passenger in the car. So when my mom told me that story, I was really young and I had no experience with substances or addiction yet. And I got goosebumps, almost like there was a connection between me and the future, almost like I knew what was going to happen to me eventually. And that story really stuck with me. Okay, so again, I'm maybe 22 or 23. I'm just out of treatment. I am trying so hard to do the right thing, and I am relapsing again and again and again. I'm back on heroin, which back then was really heroin, and I'm taking copious benzos. Again, I've got all those symptoms of undiagnosed and untreated Graves' disease going on. I'm super skinny. I can't sleep, but I am having a really hard time. My friend Mike, who's a couple years younger than me, he's a guy I met in inpatient treatment. He invites me to go out to his house. Now, partly because of that story that my mom had told me, I was always much more careful than most addicts about not driving under the influence. This day, though, I was in withdrawal, and my friend told me that he had benzos and opioids. He could get me well again. He's the kind of friend, again, we met in treatment, but over a decade post our first interaction, we were still hanging out from time to time, and every single time we hung out, I relapsed. So that kind of friendship. I mean, on the one hand, we've had deep conversations. I really care about this guy, but on the other hand, it's a friendship that's been destructive to both of us, and he's really, like, at times, really manipulated me into doing the wrong thing. And again, I'm no victim in that. I allowed it to happen, but it's kind of a toxic friendship. But if you're out there, Mikey, you know I care about you. I hope your dentures are working out for you, and I just hope we can both get this and really do better for the long run now. But anyway, I drive to Mikey's house. While I'm there, I take so many benzos and opioids. I'm texting my mom. I'm saying things that are off. She's worried enough about me that she calls me, talks to me, and now she's freaking out because she knows that I drove to Mikey's house. Now, somehow she has his number from previous shenanigans, and she calls him and she says, "Do not let my son drive home. I will pick him up. I will get the car back. Like, do not let him go home. He is in this condition. Don't let him drive. He is going to crash his car. He's going to kill himself, or he's going to kill someone else." Now, I have no memory from the time that I arrived at Mike's house to the time that, as I'll explain, I woke up in the hospital. So I don't know how much Mike tried to hold me back. I know how difficult it can be to reason with someone in that kind of state of mind. I know that we were at his grandparents' house, and maybe he didn't want me arguing or obviously impaired when his grandma was around, although she knew what was up, and she was honestly a really kind lady. Like, I'm 100% sure that if we had just explained the situation, she would have said, "Honey, you go sleep in the couch there. I don't want you to get in trouble." She was a really nice lady, and we're at this farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere outside Syracuse. It's about 20-25 minutes from where I live in a western suburb of Syracuse that's already becoming, suburban to farmland kind of liminal zone. So anyway, I'm sorry when I'm telling these stories, I'm so mortified by them. I'm like clenching up physically, and I know that I'm talking, I'm beating around the bush because it's so awful for me to relive these experiences and to think about what you guys are going to think of me after I share these stories. So I'm sorry. I'm going to try to be more direct from now on. So okay. So somehow I get in the car, and the next memory I have of waking up in the hospital, okay, there's a cop there. My mom is there too, although it's just a cop when I wake up because my mom went down the hall to use the ladies' room or something. And the cop tells me I was in a car accident. I hit another vehicle head on. And when he says that, I know in my gut I've killed someone. I literally thought about my mom telling me that story when I was young, and I am reliving that story like she's telling me about it right now. It almost feels like two overlapping reels of film or something like that. And I know he's going to tell me I killed somebody. And he tells me he found me off the road after this other woman had called 911. He found me off the road. I had totaled my car. The car had flipped over. My left arm was so mangled it didn't look like an arm anymore. He said he radioed for more help, and he asked me, what the heck happened? And I told him, I'm a heroin addict. I can't stop. I need help. So I got so lucky in this situation, okay? And part of it, I have no doubt, was the privilege of being a young, educated white person. Maybe that played into it, but even more honestly, I was just so pathetic. I meant it when I told him that. I was trying so hard to stop, and I just couldn't stop. And this was at the height of the post-oxy heroin boom. These cops and other first responders, they were seeing that young people's lives were being ruined, that they were getting convictions that they would never be able to work a professional job again with. And I got a huge break on this one. They ended up charging me only with a serious traffic offense. So there wasn't any crime related to driving under the influence. They knocked it down to some kind of serious moving violation. I did have to go to court over it. The woman who I had hit head on was incredibly kind. By some really fortuitous circumstance or action, sort of instance of physics interacting, she wasn't hurt seriously. I got what I deserved, which was the really severe injuries. I had totally crushed my elbow. I had obliterated the olecranon process. I damaged both the radius and ulna. I had to have serious reconstructive surgery with titanium hardware put in. So part of it, I think, was the cop figured like, this guy is suffering. He's going to suffer enough from this injury, because if this had been 40 or 50 years ago, I would have had an above the elbow amputation of my left arm. So, I had serious damage, and I'm sure that factored into it too. But somehow they had mercy on me, and I got away with serious points on my license, but nothing else, because they knew that I was re-immersing myself in therapy, and they saw the sincerity with which I was fighting this thing. And they also saw, my mom was mentioning how sick I was physically, like they realized something else was going on and that there was some serious diagnosis that was going to be coming through. But it was actually that incident, it was the blood work that they took while I was in the hospital from that incident that showed them that my thyroid stimulating level, that's a hormone that your pituitary produces to tell your thyroid hormone to make more of the hormones that it makes. And my TSH was profoundly suppressed. And when your TSH is low, it means your thyroid hormone is very high. So I had abysmal levels of TSH. And so, long story short, this was the beginning of them realizing this guy has serious autoimmune thyroid disease, me getting diagnosed with Graves' disease, and then me having the radio ablation. And now the radio ablation didn't magically cure my sedative addictions to opioids and benzos, but it did. Like, the problem was my addiction was so entrenched by then that it had become a monster in its own right. But having the radio ablation, getting on a proper dose of replacement levothyroxine really did open the door to sobriety for me. It wasn't even possible until I got it, if that made sense. So after that, in my mid to late 20s, things did gradually start to lighten up. The tools that I had used in treatment that I had been trying so incredibly assiduously to implement in my life to no avail started actually helping me out. I started to realize it was possible for me to do it now. So that was incident one, and I could have killed someone. I mean, I was so close to killing someone. I would have gone away for vehicular manslaughter minimum. I would have gone away for at least 10 years over that, and I would have never been able to forgive myself. I know I would have killed myself with drugs. I know that if I had killed that woman, or God forbid, a young person, maybe too, I would have killed myself, if not right away, then as soon as I got out of prison, I would have done it with drugs. So one just example of just miraculous me being spared when I didn't deserve to be spared on so many levels. Okay, so that was incident one. Now incident two, this actually happened a few months before incident one. I am again at the apex of my opioid and benzo addictions. This is before I went into inpatient rehab for the first time. Now I get my Xanax script refilled, and my family had been calling every doctor who prescribed it to me, trying to prevent that from happening, I went to urgent care, and I was an expert at getting what I wanted, and I got a Xanax script there, so my family didn't know about it. I came home, was using heroin every single day, so I was shooting up, and then I was just taking fistful after fistful of, these were 1 milligram Xanax, the blue footballs, so pretty strong dose of alprazolam, and I was taking 10, 12 milligrams at a time every couple hours for the entire day. The other thing about benzos is you forget that you're taking the medication, and that happened with barbiturates too. It killed people. They took overdoses that they didn't even know they were taking. So same thing can happen with benzos, and I was taking them by the fistful. Now my mom and my brother, my older brother, see me impaired. They know that somehow I've gotten hold of benzos on top of opioids. I am really sloppy because the combination, which is incredibly dangerous, the combination of opioids and benzos, it is multiplicatively enhances both the depression of your breathing, your blood pressure. It slows down your mind so much. It synergizes when you combine the two sedatives. So it means you're not just additively enhancing the effects of the drugs, you're multiplicatively or even exponentially enhancing them. And again, those effects include lowered heart rate, especially depressed breathing in the case of opioids and benzos, and a bunch of other really nasty things that you don't want going on. So they see how sloppy I am, and they get in their head, we got to take the rest of the benzos away from him. Now, again, as dangerous as that combo is, my advice is never to get between an addict and their drugs. It is likely to make them a feral monster, okay? Especially if you're talking about substances like benzos, which again are so disinhibiting. They're like extreme doses of alcohol in terms of people's propensities to get violent and stuff like that, even when it's not in their normal character to do so. So long story short, I somehow, I had hid the bottle somewhere, and my mom got a hold of it, and she's yelling at me, and I grabbed the bottle back from her, and my older brother is like holding me back. So he's got his arm somehow around my body. I've got my hand around the bottle, and my mom starts to try to pry apart my hands to get to the bottle. And, I'm not even this is so instinctual, for some reason, probably because I'm so mortified by what I did. I do have some memory of this incident, and I didn't know who these arms were attached to. I mean, I was just fighting like my life depended upon it. Like I was fighting like it was a battle to the death. Someone was trying to hurt me, and I just remember seeing an arm finally going in and starting to, basically pried the bottle away from me, and without even thinking about it, what do? Go and bite, and I hear this shriek from my mom, and just shriek, and I realized what happened, and I dropped the bottle, and I just stopped resisting right at that moment. Like we stopped screaming, and we're all just there kind of in awe. And my mom immediately started saying, I'm okay. I think she was like in a kind of shock, but I know she was trying to calm things down, and she goes over to the sink, and I go over to the sink with her, and I see that she's bleeding, and my mom is my role model in so many ways. I'm closer to her, and I was closer to her at that time in so many ways than anyone else on earth. I love my mom more than anything, and like I see her bleeding, and I'm starting to cry, which I never did in those days. I was so phased out and burnt out emotionally, but I start to cry because I realize what I've done to her. And my older brother's now, he starts screaming at me again, and I think my mom might have called 911, but by the time they got there, like she wouldn't say anything to allow them to prosecute me because she knew that I was just kind of acting instinctually. And again, it would have been totally proper and within her rights to prosecute me. Like I am responsible for those actions. It wouldn't have done anything constructive for my life, but I wouldn't have blamed her, of course, if she had done so. But this is that story where when you're sharing in treatment the worst things that you've ever done, the most shameful things you've ever done, this is at the very top of my list. As much as that first story where I actually could have killed someone in that accident, this is the one where I go like, there's nothing lower than that. Like I'm a scumbag. Like someone could hear this story, look at me, say I'm a scumbag, and it doesn't matter that I'm a good freaking teacher who goes above and beyond and who genuinely cares about my students. It doesn't matter that I studied medicine for years because I wanted to be like the kind of doctor who genuinely healed people mentally and physically from a place of non-judgment. It doesn't matter all the times that I've taken calls from friends and listened for hours and try to help them. Like it doesn't matter that I've done charity work and outreach work and like all of that. Like it doesn't matter. Like I just felt like I'm a scumbag, man. And like I started feeling after that, I got so reckless with my using because I was like, if this is the person I've become, I don't have the courage to end myself, but I don't want to be around anymore. Like if it's even possible that I could do something like this again, this was before the car accident. I just told myself like, I don't want to be around anymore. So I became as passively in that state of mind as you can possibly be. And I started to have overdoses that were very close to ending my life. A couple of them got me right to the brink. So it just permanently, you don't look at yourself the same way after something like that. And you really shouldn't. It's so hard to forgive yourself. And it should be. I mean, this is my mom. My mom went through absolute agony from her son's addictions, and she didn't have the chemical refuge we had. She had to live through all these sleepless nights sober, and she had to go to work the next day and try to be a put together, and not just try, but succeed at being a put together young attorney who was brilliant in her own right. So yeah, it kills me. It kills me to think about this stuff. And I, as I said, I still don't think about myself the same way. So that's number 2, the biting incident. And one more thing I forgot to say at the beginning that I really want to stress, if you are buying what you think are Xanax bars these days, there is, or any formulation, it could also be the 1 milligram footballs. I've seen other dosages. I've seen faked extended release Xanax pills. Many of these are laced with fentanyl. I read a story, I think it was New Mexico or Oregon. A man had 2 teenager sons, and they thought they were experimenting with benzos. They took the pills they had bought. Both sons died that night. This could have been me and my older brother when we were getting into this stuff together. They died that night. Very early on into experimenting with substances. Again, they thought they had benzos or pain pills, and it killed them. So if you're buying this stuff on the street, there's a really high chance that there's fentanyl in it. Please don't do it. The other thing is you might get the dark web bromazepam. This benzo that I've taken it is similar structurally to alprazolam, but in my experience, it is even more amnesic. It obliterates your memory, and it's sloppier than most of the prescription benzos. There's a reason they didn't develop it for clinical use. So please be careful. Again, I can sense that I am still procrastinating in telling this, so I'm just going to get to the final story, all right? And in some ways, this is the most shameful one. And again, all this stuff is over 10 years ago. I have, as much as I've continued to struggle, I have spiraled upward. It's been a long time before anything like any of these circumstances that I'm talking about today have happened, before I let myself get to this absolute abject level. But this final one is really tough for me to talk about. And basically, I met a guy at a bar in Ithaca that was kind of like a 0.5 bar if you're talking about between gay and straight. I've actually never been to a gay bar in my life, but this was the closest I ever got. And again, it was in Ithaca, my college town. And so one night I went out relatively sober. This was before the other 2 incidents that I'm talking about, when I was still in college. And I was just, for the first year, I was okay, but after that, I found a source of heroin and benzos, and so I was getting confirmed as a severe addict during the time frame I'm talking about. This story happened late on in college, in the beginning of the fall semester of my senior year, I believe. So I'm at this bar, and this guy who's middle-aged is chatting me up one night, and I'm pretty sober. I do have like a couple beers. I was on opioids. I was shooting up daily at the time, but again, I'm in my mind when I'm on opioids. I can plan and calculate, and because of that, I don't have the same propensity to dangerous or just like outlandish behavior. So anyway, I'm there, I'm chatting up this guy, and I remember thinking like, yeah, so I hate thinking about what I look like physically. Like I still trim my own hair most of the time, and it looks awful, and I'm a terrible dresser. So I'm not like puffing myself up, but I was maybe a 4 out of 10. I was in shape, very skinny because of the graves, but people told me I was a 4, a pretty attractive guy, or at least not bad looking. And I remember thinking, boy, I hope I have as much confidence as this middle-aged guy when I'm his age, because he's got a pot belly, and he seems really like he's going out of his way to sort of talk himself up, and he's telling me he wants to take me home that night, and like I'll never be with someone as good as him. And I never had a one-night stand. It was always like I really cared about the emotional connection, like just hooking up. It wasn't even just that I was nervous, it just didn't appeal to me without knowing the person. So I told him that. I told him I didn't do one night stands. It was nice to meet him, but he was really pushing to give me his phone number. He just kept saying, why don't you let me put it in your phone? Why don't you let me put it in your phone? And I said, no, thanks, man. Like I'm not looking for that right now. And even if you're telling me we could have a relationship, I know that you hook up, and that's not safe. I was taking advanced microbiology at the time, so I was STD knowledgeable, right? So, I'm cognizant of the dangers there. And he's so insistent about it that he writes down his number on a little piece of paper. And before I left, ordinarily normal Brian would have thrown that piece of paper out, possibly in front of this guy who was being a little bit over the top, right? But this person I call Dark Brian, again, even though I'm not on benzos right in this moment, think he reaches up through from my unconscious through space and time to make me hold on to this slip of paper. So about a week later, maybe week and a half later, I get my monthly Xanax script filled. I start my binge, and I've written about this on my blog. It's my first and second step reflections. If you ever want to read about these kind of experiences in detail, and how frustrated and disgusted that I got with myself that I would repeat this again and again and again, losing entire chunks of days and weeks and months of my life I have no memory of. But anyway, I get my Xanax script. I start to binge, and 3 days later, I wake up from it like I always do. My entire script is gone. I'm convinced that I've lost it or left it somewhere like I always am. The reality is I have taken every single one of those 60 pills. I've taken every single one of those 60 milligrams that's meant to last a month that has lasted like 2.5 days. And so I am waking up with no memory of the previous 2 days. I'm going through my phone and looking at my text messages because, again, I'm idiotically convinced that I couldn't possibly have taken them all. I wouldn't have allowed myself to do that. This month was going to be different. So I have to find out where I might have left my script. And I see text messages. I don't recognize the number. It's not under a name in my phone. And it takes me a moment to see it's a local area code. Okay, so it could be a student or a townie, but more likely to be a student because most college kids are on their parents' plans, right? So I am looking at the number and all of a sudden it registers like, oh my God, it's Adam from the bar. And I look at these messages and there are mentions of specific sexual acts and of me telling him, I will do this if you give me this amount of money. And then there's a message afterward that says like, thanks for the fun, like that was so awesome. Let's do it again. And if you want to do more, like this is what I'll pay you. So I, magna cum laude, Ivy League graduate that I would be in another semester or two, sold myself, for money to get heroin. So that is, I don't judge sex workers like a lot of people do, but that is something that I would never in a million years do sober. It's something that just for me feel like is incompatible with my sense of dignity. It's incompatible with how I believe physical intimacy should work, how I believe physical intimacy, which I don't think we should ever be ashamed of, as long as it's between consenting adults. But I believe that that kind of thing just takes away from what should be a really beautiful coming together and getting closer to human beings. So that's another thing I have to live with. And every guy that I met afterward, including my fiance, I tell them about this, and for the rest of my life I have to live with that. I've written about it on my blog, and there are people and there are opportunities that will be forever closed off to me. And people might ask, why are you sharing this stuff? Why don't you just pretend it never happened? And I pretended it never happened. I kept two separate lives for decades while I was dying from addiction. And all it did was create cognitive dissonance that wore me down further. Like, this is who I am. This is what I've been through. It has overall made me a stronger and better and more compassionate person. And I have to live with this. And these days, I'm okay with that all being out in the open. I told myself when I started speaking about my experience on my blog, and now 4 months ago, I started talking about it on YouTube. I told myself, even if every professional door is closed to me, after I do this, like even if I have to work at a gas station for the rest of my life, it's worth it to me to be able to write truthfully about my experience, as I believe that will help others. And it's worth it to me just to have that cognitive dissonance and that living a lie lifted from me. So those are the 3 lowest moments of my life. When you look at me with judgment, please honestly introspect and think about if you were sharing the 3 lowest moments of your life, and particularly if those moments happened when you were, like, for example, if you're not an addict, when you were as drunk as you can ever imagine being. Thinking about how even a little alcohol changes your personality, your perception, your extent of emotional intensity. Like, think about all that. Think about that magnified 100-fold with benzos, and please, please at least consider giving me some leeway, because I can promise you I have been incredibly harsh on myself about this stuff. Again, for years I was hoping that one day I would, like the doctors were telling me, you are risking your life with these combinations of sedatives every single day. You're risking your life injecting drugs because you're going to get endocarditis and die, or bacterial pneumonia, and that can take you out every 2 or 3 days. So I kept really just trying to make that happen. Again, I didn't have the courage, the strength of will, just like I didn't have the will to stop addiction. I didn't have the courage to just end my existence and let my give my family a break. So I just went around for years like that, just waiting for it to end. My friends all died. I'm like, I have not survivor guilt, because I know that my friends would want me to make it, and I know that they would want me to live the best life for all of us. But I do have that feeling of like someone who came back from, say, a really unpopular war like the Vietnam War, who is socially reviled because they fought, and who's the only living member of their platoon or whatever the group of military personnel is, right? I have that kind of feeling because, for example, at one long-term rehab I was in, that in a group of 6 guys, I'm the only one who made it, who's still alive. So all the other ones died from ending their own life or from OD. So it's intense. I think about these people every single day. At least a third of my best friends are gone, So, and I won't fully be at peace until I join them someday. So sometimes I think with the health effects I've suffered from my addiction and stuff, like, it's not so hard to me. I'm not wanting to hurt myself on any level now, but I do. It's easier for me to accept that this will come to an end, because it will be me as this headstone epitaph in Legends of the Fall, which is a wonderful set of short stories. It says, for this atheist brother who died, it says, "We will not see him, but we will join him." And I think of it that way. Like, I'll join them. I might not see them, but I'll join all my friends. And the final thing that I wanted to say was, I participated in 12-step programs really intensely in the past. I no longer recommend them for a lot of reasons. I made a video about that. I no longer recommend them as the only or the primary mode of treatment, that is. Sorry, guys, I had to change venue. My brother just came in, and I was at the kitchen table, but I only got about a minute's worth of stuff left to say. But yeah, so wait, what was I saying? Oh, I was saying I no longer recommend 12-step meetings as a primary recovery modality for the reasons I talked about in my video on that subject. However, I do know that they're helpful as an add-on to other science and evidence-based forms of treatment, and they've taught me a lot about addiction and about my own life. And in terms of 12-step analysis, the first step is we admitted that we were powerless over our substance of choice, that our lives have become unmanageable. And there's a cognitive, obvious way to accept that statement. And that is, okay, I can see in my life, and I know I take one drink, and one is too many, and 1,000 is never enough. I can't stop, and I do out of character things when I take benzos, in my instance, right? So that's sort of the shallow way to do the first step. But there's a deeper first step, and that's hearing a story like what happened to my mom's client who killed someone while drunk, in realizing, like, I am so out of control that not only could that happen to me, it will eventually happen to me, because the endpoints of addiction are jails, institutions, and death. It is progressive, and if you don't get out of it, you're going to be the person in the newspaper article. And there's a very visceral level of understanding the first step, and when that clicks, that is what really gives you the power, the motivation to get better. But it is terrifying. As I've described it in my writing, addiction is like having a dark stranger with a gun to your head saying, steal from your family. Saying, put this in, shoot this in your arm, even though there's a decent chance it could kill you. Saying, lie to everyone you love, lie and lie and lie, and make it so convincing, because again, your life depends on it. Okay, so it's like that. When you understand that you're an addict at this visceral level, it is, I don't even have words for how scary it is. Like, you realize it's like, I guess there's that metaphor that I just talked about of the stranger with a gun to your head, but in some ways it's even worse than that, because you realize the sickness is coming from within you, It's like you have another personality, like I talked about the dark Brian, and everything you think you are and everything you think you value is perversely inverted in this dark person inside of you, and it's like a demon taking you over, and just like a demon taking you over with the benzos, you might not even remember what you do. So it is paralyzingly scary. It is one of the scariest things. It's as scary as being mugged and being in danger of your life or being violated in other ways. Like, if you are doing 12-step work and you are processing it at the level that, in my opinion, you should be, you're working on the first step specifically, and the second step and the third step where you're recognizing the problem, you're believing that a higher power can alleviate the problem, and you're making a decision to turn your will and your life over to that power. If you're doing this at the visceral level, you're going to feel, again, visceral, physically sick to your stomach when you realize, like, oh my God, I'm in this deep and I can't get myself out of it. And I'm going to be the next newspaper headline. I'm going to be the next person who hurt someone else so badly. So that's sort of the level at which I ultimately process these stories. Again, it is still physically uncomfortable for me to talk about them. I know you can't see it, but I've been like clenching and unclenching all my muscles while I talk about it. I've been feeling squirmy. And again, I know I beat around the bush early on in this video. So I'm sorry it took me a little while to get to the actual experiences. I tried to be direct, but it's tough to talk about this stuff. So if you got this far, thank you so much for listening. Please consider leaving a comment or a like, or if you enjoy this type of content, maybe subscribing and considering sticking around. So again, thank you for listening. And if you have any questions or you have any experiences you'd like to share, I am always really active in the comments, and I reply to my emails and everything like that. Although I've been getting so much correspondence lately and my full-time job has been busy enough that it's no longer like a 24 to 48 hour turnaround. It's taking me like a week or even maybe 10 days to respond to some people, especially if the messages are really detailed, because I don't want to just shoot off some half-baked response. I really want to like hear and process everything that you guys are sharing with me. So I love you all parasocially, and you mean so much to me for real, like normally. And I will see you all next time. So thank you again.